Good morning, good evening. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing, we wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. The Chinese government, in kind of a follow on to yesterday's subject, has announced a very interesting coming policy. They are going to try to redistribute the wealth. Now, what they're publicly announcing is that they're going to put a tax on the rich and take their money and give it to the middle and lower classes. Supposedly, the whole strategy that they've been employing was to create some rich people that they could tax. This is a very interesting strategy by a government. Now, please remember, when I talk about China and the Chinese people, I'm not referring to the everyday citizen necessarily. The normal person in China is like you and I. We work hard. We come home to our significant other, children, whatever sort of housing arrangement that we have. And that's the way they live, because that's the way most of the world lives. But the Chinese government wants to change all that. Now that they've created millionaires and billionaires, they want to take their fair share. Now, the first thing you need to know is a redistribution of wealth rarely, if ever, benefits the average person. Governments love to get hold of money, and China has kind of shown their hand here, that they're going to get money off the billionaires and the trillionaires. Now, the United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Germany, etc., would never try this. And the reason is their billionaires and trillionaires all have their money offshore. It's hidden. You might remember Mitt Romney saying he pays less tax than his secretary does. And that's simply because creative accounting. When they buy a car, unlike for us, a car is an expense. For them, it's a way to write something off. Because the first second you drive a car off the lot, it depreciates in value. And that depreciation, how much it's worth less, is something you can write off on a tax return. This is why millionaires and billionaires and trillionaires like to buy collectibles. Collectibles are things that they can put their money into, hide it away, and it's kind of tax-free. When eventually they do sell it, let's just take a Black Lotus from Magic the Gathering. A Black Lotus can be worth anywhere from $10,000 to a couple $100,000 in good condition. So in 28 years, that investment has gone from a $10 investment to, a $200,000 investment. That's a pretty good rate of return. So if you're planning on holding something for 10 years, that's fine. It's a great way to dump your money when the government audits your accounts. Look, I have no cash. Well, where'd this money go? Oh, it was invested. Okay, well, you can't divest yourself of a car. You can't divest yourself of a collectible. So ultimately, the government can't really touch that money. They can, but it's expensive, it's time consuming, and then they have to prove that what you have is worth what they actually think it is. They'll go after you if you owe enough, but they're not going to pick a fight because the billionaires and trillionaires also can afford lawyers, at least in the Western, educated, industrialized, rich democracies, the weird countries. China, it's not quite the same. See, the Chinese millionaires and billionaires are still citizens of China, and they're required to keep their wealth at home. So when China says, okay, we're going to take 20%, they haven't announced an actual amount yet. They just said they're going to redistribute this wealth. And 20% is, I think that's somewhat reasonable. Pretty much any millionaire, billionaire, trillionaire could probably find 20% in cash reserves. They will, of course, argue this and say they don't deserve to be taxed at a different rate, but I think most of the population will agree they should get taxed at the same rate as the rest of us, because we know that they're able to hide things better than we can anyway. China having this leverage kind of shows their hand. They're not really capitalists. They're not really open. It's not free. everything is still at the whim of the Chinese government. It's still a command economy, just like the Germans in World War II, just like the Russians for most of the 20th century. A little committee at the top meets, plans, and decides who gets what. You get 10 blocks of cheese in the year, and if you need more cheese, then too bad, you're going to have to trade somebody your toilet paper to get more cheese. Now, money can be used to represent labor in that system, and indeed it has. The ruble always existed, and people got paid in rubles, and they were allowed a certain amount of food, a certain amount of credits to buy a car, etc., etc. And the Chinese yen has managed to become a global currency. It was illegal to sell rubles outside of Russia. You couldn't just buy rubles anywhere. You had to go to specific Soviet-approved places. The yen, they've been trying to make it a worldwide currency forever. But now, for people who've invested in the yen, the fact that they're taking it crypto, and the fact that they're turning around to their own citizens and saying, no, you can't get that rich. That money comes to us. It shows that the Chinese government has been playing a pretty masterful game all along. From the 1970s, when China was a very underdeveloped economy, till now, when they have a decent infrastructure, they've been playing a great game. That was simply get our people rich enough so that we can tax them. Now, for a long time, I was dating a Chinese woman. Wonderful girl. And she told me basically where she was, which was not in one of the free economic zones. You would go through university to become, say, a teacher or a nurse or whatever it was. And you would be a teacher and a nurse, and that would be what you did till the day you retired. You wouldn't get to be promoted to head teacher. You wouldn't get to be head nurse. No. That required a different requirement. There was no upward mobility possible. And this is one of the weaknesses in their system, that lack of upward mobility. In the Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic countries, hard work is perceived of as a good thing. We'll be discussing that later. But if you work hard enough, the idea is you'll be shown as a good leader and you will get promoted. And you will make more money, you'll be able to do better things, you will work harder to show, hey, I appreciate it. Now, this is not how things work in the Western world, but this is theoretically how they work. But in China, that doesn't even happen in theory. Inside the free economic zones, it does. But the free economic zones are simply places that were reserved for the Chinese government to exploit. Now they have all the capital that they need. They have the money coming in. They have the people being a certain degree of rich, whether you want to call it millionaires, billionaires, trillionaires, whatever you want to call it. They are already rich. And so the Chinese government is exercising their option, to use a Western term. They're cashing out. They're calling in the favor. They're saying, okay, here's your tithe to the government. You're going to owe us that, or you're going to not be a Chinese citizen. And we know how hard it is for Chinese people to emigrate. Yes, they can do it, but it's difficult. There's a lot of payoffs involved, and a lot of it is on the, shall we say, quasi-legal end. For the record, the Chinese lady I dated came over legally. No shenanigans, no working in massage parlors, none of that crazy stuff. No, she came over and she busted her tail off to come over, get an education, and get the job that she wanted. Which is what most people aspire to do. But when you're dealing with a command economy and a government that has frequently treated its citizens less than admirably, which is true for every government in the world, but the Chinese government has a history of massive repression. And this backlash on the billionaires, while it is laudable, is not something that can really be repeated in the Western world. Our billionaires are too well interconnected that if Canada, the United States, and Europe altogether passed a billionaire tax, the money that they had would instantly disappear. the former 45th President of the United States, he can hide money like nobody's business. It's kind of a requirement for a billionaire that you need a really good tax accountant on your side. So, keep your eyes on China for the next little bit. With what I said last time and what I'm saying now, it's going to be interesting to see what happens to the Chinese economy over the next 10, 20 years. How is this experiment going to go with a redistribution? And I say redistribution in quotes, because a redistribution in money basically means the government's taking it. Yes, they'll probably spend some on hospitals. Yes, they're probably going to spend some on roads and services for the people. But most of that money just simply disappears into the government coffers, never to be seen again. Just an interesting thought and an added point to yesterday's video, or was it the day before? Whatever I did that video. It's the previous one before this. Nevertheless, some food to think on. We wish to thank you for joining us for the Silverlight Show. If you enjoyed this show, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, we hope you have a fantastic day.